Here.
Councillor Reed,
Here.
Councillor Kohler,
Here.
Councillor Duran,
Here.
and Councillor Day. Don't see Ross, so we have 6 present.
All right, and I believe Councillor Day is going to join us a little bit later. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us on this virtual work session tonight. We have the benefit of making this a twofer. It's a benefit for us as a council, it's a benefit for our community to be able to tune in and hear from 2 very different and yet very important programs that have, and businesses that affect our community. So we're going to start off with Wendy Valise and her team from Portland General Electric. Wendy, it's so good to see you, and thank you for joining us tonight for this work session. We've been planning for quite.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Oh, great. Thank you. I'm going to bring up the presentation, but I want to say good evening and thank you, Mayor Clark and City Council Tim and city staff. We're so great. We're so grateful for making time for us this evening on your busy agenda to join you this evening. Before we get started, I just want to say, because it's not too far behind us yet, I want to say thank you to the city for the support, collaboration, and coordination and communication during the historic February ice storm. As Mayor Clark can attest, there were daily check-ins during that storm, and really appreciate what we got from Mayor Clark and the entire city staff. As we know, partnership during the storm and recovery is really important and greatly appreciated. By the way, for those of you who don't know me, I think I know everyone, but I'm Wendy Valise. I'm the local government affairs manager, and it's an honor to be here in front of you, in front of all of you. I have long been inspired by the leadership at Kaiser, and just grateful that we have the PGE team here. Joining me this evening is Maria Pope, President and CEO of PGE, along with Bill Mesner, who's our Director of Mitigation and Resiliency, and Kevin Putnam, who's the Director of Operations. With that, I'm going to bring up the presentation and hand it over to Maria Pope, our President and CEO.
Hello, and thank you all for having us this evening. It's an honor to be with you here, Mayor Clark and council members. And boy, between the fires, the discussion around the pandemic, and most recently the February ice storm, it's been quite extraordinary. If you don't mind skipping to 2 pages in, that would be great. Are you controlling it, Wendy? No, yes. Maybe one before this one. Perfect, thank you. So as you all know, we experienced a 1 in 40-year event in February with the significant magnitude of ice that coated everything. And we lived through so much then, and that was the largest restoration in our company's history. You had just under 12,000 of your community members out of power, about a third of all of your community members. And I also appreciate how difficult it was with all the debris and everything on the roads, and cleaning up took a very long period of time. Please know that we recognize that now more than ever, particularly during the pandemic, people rely on electricity, and it's such an important way that they are staying warm, that they are working, that their children are going to school. And we are doing all that we can to become more resilient and prepared for these sorts of events. Last fall, as we all know, our area experienced devastating wildfires, which is probably the result of changing weather patterns and global warming. And of course, the pandemic and all that has been entailed. Please know that our strategy of reducing the carbon impact of our energy supply creating more green energy, expanding the uses of electrification, which actually is the lowest type of carbon intensive fuel out there, and then improving our performance is really where we are focused day in and day out. We have aggressive goals around climate change, 80% reductions in the power that we serve our customers by 2030, and to be net zero or zero emissions associated with that power we serve our customers by 2040. Just this past year, in the fourth quarter, we closed Oregon's only coal plant, and we actually opened in conjunction with an independent power producer, the Wheat Ridge Energy Facility. Literally just a stone's throw, you can see the turbines from the distance, and of Boardman, and you can see Boardman in the distance of the Wheat Ridge Energy Facility. But that new facility combines wind, solar, and battery storage in one generating station, all at scale. It's actually the first of its type in the country, and is really important in us being able to leverage the really valuable resources that those who came before us created in terms of our transmission infrastructure from the east side of the state to load centers in Kaiser and elsewhere. I'd like Kevin and Bill to talk a little bit more about the devastating fire events that we went into. And let's turn to the next page, because Mayor, I think this says so much about our partnership with all of you. And I think if there's anything that we've learned over the last 12 months, it's that we must be agile and we must be well prepared. And partnerships like the one that we have with PG in the city of Kaiser are critical as we work on our climate goals, strengthen resiliency, and really are able to serve customers 24/7, 365 days a year. So thank you and your staff for all that you have done. And in particular, Mayor Clark, thank you so much for your leadership, being able to speak directly with you during these challenging times, understand what you are seeing and hearing on the ground. It makes it so much easier for us to really understand how we can better serve your community. I also am really excited. I have been to the new Chick-fil-A, and my kids love it. The Brook Lake Reconductor project that was put in to recently support the Marion County Resource Recovery Facility is a project we're very proud of. And then also the upgrades to the Kennedy Elementary and McKay High Schools. We've worked very closely with you all. And so the partnership is not just in tough times, but it's also in good times. And then, and we recognize that we've actually been a part of your communities for over 100 years. I think hearing from the head of the Oregon Historical Society at your event just before we all went into lockdown reminded us so much of all of that. But we also have a lot in common. I think it's one of the reasons pulling together during challenging times is that much more important. And that was, we recognize that we all are essential service providers. We're here for our residents, for our community members, to create safe and reliable environments and to respond quickly during a disaster. So with that, let me hand it over to Kevin, who will spend some more time talking about how we're meeting our common goals. So Kevin?
Thank you, Maria. So as Maria stated, the ice event we just experienced was a 40-year event, and the damage caused by the ice storm was like anything we've seen in decades. The restoration was an all-hands-on-deck effort, and we appreciate working with great partners like the City of Kaiser. I've been asked many times what made this storm particularly challenging. And it was the fact that it was a series of multiple storms coming in close together each time, adding more ice, that created hazardous conditions for our customers, our crews, and other emergency responders. PG sustained massive damage to our transmission system, and these are the lines that connect our generation plants to our substations and in between our substations. And in fact, we had ice as thick as 1.5 inches that caked our lines and equipment. And as quickly as we could restore one outage, another one would occur. And then sometimes in the same segment where we're working. So And as crews were able to reach more areas, they discovered even more damage that had to be addressed. So in Kaiser, the outages began between February 11th and February 19th. And in total, there was 11,519 total customer outages in Kaiser. The average outage duration experienced by those customers were 62 hours. And we'd like to sincerely thank you for helping us coordinate the closure of I-5. And that facilitated restoration of one of the transmission lines that I referenced earlier. So really appreciate the help in coordinating that closure. Marion County, the hardest hit cities being Kaiser, Woodburn, Scotts Mills, and areas of unincorporated Marion County. But in all, nearly 129,000, or actually slightly over 129,000 customers in Marion County were affected by this event. So to rise to that challenge, we brought in mutual assistance crews from 17 regional utilities, and this put more crew boots on the ground than at any time in PGE's 130-year history. Those crews worked around the clock, 24/7, to get the job done under those challenging conditions of ice and long hours. So we are incredibly proud of the PGE team. At the same time, we take away many important lessons that will help us improve our restoration efforts for large-scale events like this in the future. Next slide, Wendy. And also, as Maria mentioned, we've had the ice storm, the fires, and so we've learned a lot from these emergencies, and we want to share with you some of the highlights of how we're looking to further strengthen our resiliency efforts. We're developing and preparing to deploy different equipment standards and how we build our system. We're also accelerating or greater use of automation to build a smarter, more integrated grid, as well as we're piloting a program with line sensors for remote monitoring to proactively address issues, as well as establishing an alarm alert system for that issue detection. Also, we continue to expand our fitness program. So fitness is an acronym, but essentially what that is an inspection program where we do an inspection system-wide of our poles, cross arms, the facilities we use to serve our customers. Also in high-risk areas, we do an annual detailed inspection, and right now we're currently conducting an evaluation to broaden those risk areas. And we're also working together with our partners on municipal permitting so we can get out and do that work. Also, as we've went through these events, we're looking to strengthen our supply chain as you look across the nation and the events that are going on. We want to ensure that we have the materials we need, no matter how large the emergency that we face. And as always, we're looking to ways that we can prevent outages within Kaiser. So we're looking for new solutions across the enterprise to where we can solve common problem areas. Also, we're working to fine tune our vegetation management practices and programs, as well as partner with our customers on backup power options and resiliency plans. And with that, I'd like to thank you for the time, and I'll turn it over to Bill Mesner, who will speak a little more.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Maria. So Maria and Kevin both touched on this a little bit, which is we have a foundation of how we do our planning for any kind of emergencies that we face. And that foundation is based on the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. And that allows us to have a common language and vocabulary with strategic partners such as yourself. So I think your local fire departments and police departments all have emergency planning based on NIMS. So that's really one of the important foundational tools that we do so we can work and partner very quickly. But with that being said, we don't plan for just ice or just a wildfire or just a pandemic. We plan for many events that we could be facing, and that ability is of that NIM structure allows us to expand and contract for that event. But on this slide here, you'll see our storms. We talked about the pandemic already. Global warming has other challenges to us, which wildfire is one of those. But we also have cyber and physical security threats. So there are bad actors in this world. We just had a big event on the East Coast, Colonial Pipeline, that made national headlines. We have a big, strong team that works very diligently on a daily basis to ensure that we don't have those type of events happen to us. We test our employees daily on, not really daily, but we test our employees with phishing campaigns because we are the first line of defense. And also our customers trust us with a lot of their information. And so we want to be good stewards of that information and protect it. In addition to that, physical security. And so we have invested heavily on how we protect our assets from bad actors as well. In terms of Cascadia, which is not really a question of if, but when, I have another slide that will go into a little deeper on that, but we're planning for that event. It's a 9-point earthquake, which will cause a lot of challenges to itself in our communities that we both live and serve in. And then lastly, we're a regional grid. And so we're not like Texas. Texas was a state unto itself, but we're part of in the Pacific Northwest of where we can share our generation. But with that, we're also have to be prepared for if something happens in another state that we can respond to that and make sure our customers still have the power that they need to be to continue the work that they do. Now, with all of those things that we're preparing for, the question here on the bottom of the slide is like, well, how do we do that? Well, we have plans. We have our base plans that we test and we exercise against. We have national exercises that we're part of, things that are known as GridX. We also do tabletop exercises as our own internal to ourselves as a company. And each time we're doing that, we're always on the continuous improvement cycle on how to get better. And then we have the real events, as Kevin already mentioned earlier, is that we learn from those events as well, and how do we always get better. We have system improvements. Those are such things that from seismic reinforcement that we have across our system to improvements in just how we're designing the grid of the future. We have redundant systems. A great example of a redundant system is the Integrated Operations Center that we're building right now. It is designed to withstand the Cascadia event, so we are here and we can recover quickly. And that system even has a backup system, which we call our Readiness Center. But I think the most important part of this slide is our strategic partnerships, and that's with you as well. And so Maria says this all the time, we want to have partnerships well in advance of a crisis. Developing relationships in the time of crisis is not the best place to be doing that. We have to have that trust and everything up front. And so we want to have these relationships now so we can, in that time of need, all of us are very quick to react. We're also part of international groups so we can expedite our learning. One example of that is the International Wildfire Risk Mitigation Consortium. I know it's a mouthful, but really that is a group that has utilities in Australia as well as North and South America. We're learning as an organization, as an industry, on how to prepare for wildfires. So that learning can be done a lot faster for all those that we serve. And then we're part of normal or standard industry groups known as Edison Electric Institute or the Western Energy Institute. We're always learning from each other.
And I'd like to say Bill is being modest. He actually chairs that group for Australia, New Zealand, and the western part of the United States. So we're bringing the best of what people are working on globally to our region through Bill's expertise.
Thank you very much, Maria. And then lastly, and Kevin touched on this too, is that the hallmark of our industry, which is something that is really neat to ourselves, is that we have mutual aid assistance, not only for us to be helped, as we just talked about in February, but for us to help others as well. Next slide, please. So this is what I won't go through this slide for too long, but really I want to concentrate on the image there. And we're in that area, that reddish orange area, and that's where this is showing the damage that our state will have during a Cascadia event. And that damage is going to go from Seattle all the way to the border of California. And I don't go over this slide to scare people. I just really want to make sure that we're prepared and we know what's in front of us and what we can do and what we can be better at. But in that area of our territory, the state, this slide here, or the image, or the words there are coming from the Oregon Resiliency Plan. And that electricity will be out for 1 to 3 months across our state. And then, police and fire stations 2 to 4 months. But the point here is that we have to be prepared as a company and as a community, because it's going to take time for us to recover. And then what are some of the things that we are doing to prepare? So we are continuing to expand our training and our planning and our resiliency of our infrastructure. We are creating strong partnerships with cities such as yourself and the counties and other cities that we serve. We are preparing through exercises, and we're doing that investment where I talked about the Integrated Operations Center, which will open up in October of this year. And then we have a backup to that backup, which is our PG Readiness Center. But all of that will give us a good foundation to recover when this event does happen. And I have one more slide that I want to share with you. And this is just circling back to wildfire. And Maria and Kevin touched on this a little bit as well. But we learned a lot as a community that wildfires are real to our area too. During that event and last Labor Day weekend, we exercised what we call a PSPS, a Public Safety Power Shutoff in the Mount Hood corridor. That impacted where we proactively turned off power, so our assets would not be a source of ignition. But that impacted 5,000 of our customers. And that storm alone, we had wind damage throughout our territory. 100,000 of our customers had outages as a result of that storm. And then we had significant fire damage, as we all know. But so how are we preparing to get better is the question. And so we are doing fire risk modeling, seeing how we can expand that tool, the PSPS. It's a tool of last resort, but if we do want to exercise it, we need to be prepared for it. We are designing construction standards where we are transitioning in some fire risk areas to ductile iron poles versus wood poles, and covered tree wire and fiberglass cross arms. We do a proactive inspection in those areas where there's a high fire risk. So we go in there, we're looking for things that need to be repaired before they break. And we have an aggressive vegetation management program. And Kevin talked a little bit on the neat technology that we're testing and piloting in the Mount Hood corridor, which is this early fault detection. So it will determine faults before we can even see those with our naked eye and be proactive in that space. And then we're increasing our situational awareness. We're in the middle of implementing what we call weather stations, so we can understand the weather at a micro level, not a macro level. And so we're putting in basically our own weather station situational awareness program in our service territory, so we know what's happening, in the moment, so we can make real informed decisions. And of course, all of this is that we're preparing and response and how we recover. And then really the last point on this is this community outreach. So this discussion today is part of that community outreach. And again, it's that developing of that partnership, and so we can be prepared in the future. And I think that's where I want to end my conversation today, Maria. I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. So as we think about partnerships, Bill said it's important that we form them and make them stronger in blue sky days. Please know that we're also, in addition to working with the emergency management team in Marion County, we're also working with so many others, bringing some of those best practices together. In terms of if there's anything that you're concerned about that we can work on, Wendy Valise, myself, of course, Randy, anything we can do to be helpful. I did want to mention one thing, and that is that for the past year during the pandemic, as you all know, we have not been exercising any, basically our last resort when people don't pay their bills is to turn the power off. And we've not had any power shutoffs of residential customers. We have been working to collect from commercial customers, and we've probably in the past number of months shut off about 70 different commercial customers across our almost million area customers. But we are going to begin on the residential side in about midsummer. One of the things that we have been doing is that we have been calling proactively to people with high bills, connecting them to programs. So it is not our intention to have people, as we still are in the pandemic, going without power. It is our intention for people who we're unable to get to. First of all, they may have moved in with many businesses. We've actually determined that their premises were no longer occupied. So that was why they weren't returning our calls. It's really important that we're able to connect people who need help to federal funds, which are called LIHEAP funds, state funds, Oregon Heat funds, or funds that we have through our company to get those funds to customers to be able to make a difference. And so we have a number of payment options. We'll work with customers, and we've really empowered our people on the front line to be able to make decisions and get people the help they need. But if there's any concern you ever have, either Wendy, myself, Randy, we can spend more time with you on that. But I just wanted to be upfront with people on that because, as you all are as well, we are a business and need to make sure that we're continuing restarting those collections. But I wanted to thank you, Mayor Clark, for your leadership. It's really been exceptional in the time I have been in this role. Your guidance, your insights, and your entire city council team, as well as Tim and the entire Kaiser staff. We feel extraordinarily privileged and close to your community. You've been a terrific partner, and we really are very appreciative. So I think there's at least one question with regards to hydro, and we can take questions that people have. So looks like there's one question that's come up, and then I can address the hydro situation.
Yes, there's several of us that have questions. So yeah, Councilor Kohler asked the hydro one. So if you want to go to that one first, then Councilor Herrera, and then Councilor Kohler.
Okay. So the first one with regards to hydro in the Pacific Northwest, about 55% of the total energy generated is hydro. It is less actually for Oregon than it is for the state of Washington and some other and Idaho. For our utility, hydro depends on the amount of precipitation, but it's about a quarter of our generation is hydro. It comes from several different sources. The first one closest to you is the Clackamas River area, so off of Mount Hood. We run a number of facilities, and actually we run the facility actually for Eugene as well, that's in that same river system. The next is on the Deschutes River, the Pelton Round Butte facility. We do not own the entire facility, but the entire facility's output serves our customers. We work in, have a partnership with the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, and we work closely with them. And then third, our other source of hydro are contracts that we have with some of the very large dams on the Columbia River, mostly out of the state of Washington. So we call those the Mid-Columbia dams, and we get quite a bit of power from those. And then fourth, we actually buy power in the market. And when you buy power in the market, sometimes it's specifically specified from a generating source, but more often than not, it might be sort of a market average. And so then we would be picking up that market average of about 55% hydro. Or let's say we were to go to British Columbia and buy some of their hydro, which we do with frequency. We participate in a market called the Energy Imbalance market, which means that when there's excess solar energy in California, Arizona, Desert Southwest, during the day, we import that energy into our area. And then let's say at night when the sun's not shining, but there might be excess wind, we'll send our wind or hydro to California. So we participate in it with other utilities, other regulated utilities, in a way of maximizing renewable energy, hydro, wind, and solar at the lowest cost for customers when those generation sources truly are surplus. So in the month of May right now, we're probably generating power out of a lot more hydro than we would, because we have melt running off of the mountains from as far north as the northern parts of British Columbia up to the Yukon, all the way to Alberta, to our facilities more close to home. So that's a complicated way of answering a simple question, but I hope that's helpful.
And then I got thumbs up there. Go to Councilor Herrera, and then Councilor Day after that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I really appreciate the proactive, being from a background of public works, being proactive. That's incredible. But now, as far as the weather station, in-house weather station, if you will, has there been a problem with that's for convenience mostly, or as far as having?
No, let me let Bill talk to you about that. No, it's very important that we have our own weather stations, and quite frankly, we're going to be putting more out in our service territory. We learned a lot through this last year, and we actually have meteorologists on our staff that were very helpful in helping us see in advance problems that could be coming. And their level of accuracy for both the ice storm and the high winds that we saw that resulted in some of the wildfires was very good. So they also, their regular day jobs would be, a lot of our energy comes from wind. And so it's really important that we understand how the wind is blowing hour to hour, but also somewhat like within 15-minute swings. So Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about weather stations?
Yeah, so it's really to help us with our situational awareness. And so again, right now, the way the weather stations are now in the state, they're very much far and in between, right? I think it gives us a good idea about what the weather is for us as a general public, right? But as Maria stated, the wind that's blowing in Mount Huckabee, it's going to be vastly different than Salem, right? So we want to have more intel in order for us to make really good informed decisions about how to run the system. And in some cases that, hey, we need to turn it off because the wind's getting very strong.
Also, Bill, you mentioned something about, which caught my ear, ductile iron pole. Is that, I've never heard of that. I hear in the water world, ductile iron is for burning tube eventually, but I didn't realize you did that with pole. Is that something that's in the future?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more in the future, and and it's just really again, how do we harden the grid so it's more resilient, right? So metal brings some good capabilities that wood doesn't. Wood has some strong capabilities as well, but I think we're going to have many tools on how to make our grid stronger.
Thank you very
Kevin,
much.
anything else you want to say with regards to power poles and what can be expected? We get a lot of questions frequently on undergrounding. And I know Mayor Clark has asked questions about this in the past. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we think about that?
Yeah, I think Bill hit the nail on the head when he said there's a lot of tools, and so like we talk about different pole compositions, and there's the right composition for the right application. Just as undergrounding versus overhead, there's also the right application to meet the requirements. So that's very much the way we're looking at it when we talk about the new and enhanced design and construction standards. Is they're the suite of tools that we have to evaluate what the criteria are where we're installing the assets to try and get the most resilient asset in place. So across the board, like Bill touched on, is like the ductile iron versus wood versus fiberglass versus steel. There's a suite of pole compositions to utilize, and we're trying to make the best low-cost decision for our customers.
I want to tag on to that a little bit. A couple of years ago at League of Oregon Cities, we had a roundtable with Maria, and that question was asked about overhead versus underground, and the very informed answer that we received from that, because it's not a matter of take that wire and bury it. There's a whole lot more that goes to that. So running that overhead wire is a whole different thing than taking, putting the appropriate materials underground. It's not the same thing. You're not burying the same thing. You have different connections. And
yep.
It really gave me a much better sense of this is way more complicated than it would appear on the surface.
And Kevin and Bill, we had, Wendy will tell you, we had one of our retired linemen is a city councilor in Salem. So everybody got to hear about his missing his work at PGE.
It was great. It gave us electeds who don't have that expertise the details to be able to answer the questions that we get from constituents going, well, why not? Well, let me tell you why not. It's not apples and apples, it's apples and kumquats. Yeah. So they are very different. So with that, I'll go to Councilor Day.
Thank you. So, Mr. Putnam said that PGE is analyzing high risk areas. I was just wondering what is a high risk area?
Bill, do you want me to take that one, or do you want
No, I can go.
Okay.
So to me, the way we look at a high risk area is to look at, okay, how's the forest density? What, is there access for a fire department to get there quickly? What are the resources? So in case something wrong did happen, how quickly can we recover from it? So that's how we're looking at it in terms of, as part of a high risk analysis. It's also a high risk area. It's also like, it includes, okay, what's in that area, right? So what could happen if a fire did happen in that area?
Right. Well, is it only in forested areas? I mean, are there high risk areas in urban settings? Are there?
So yeah, it's a good question. There's something we call the urban wildland interface, and so they call it the WUI. And so a lot of the biggest risks that I think that California's been seeing and Oregon sees is that interconnection of where society is moving into the wildland area.
Right.
Councillor Day, I would say that as someone who's actually working out of the office today and in Portland, the risks in the cities are just different than the risks that we have in the country. So maybe less around wildfire, but more around theft and other issues. So it's, we appreciate all of the very differences of the service territory and recognize that it's not more or less. It's just very different sorts of risks.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there were different, like you just, and I think you just answered it, are there different types of high risk areas and, different types of risk? I got it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to tag on one more thing that was brought up about utility customers and so forth. And my question is partly to Tim. We already have a program, much like PGE does, to assist utility customers who can't pay their bills and so forth due to COVID and related disasters to be able to be caught up, start fresh and be even. So are we communicating between our utility billing and PGE and other utilities to send customers who are facing these difficulties in all of their payments to the same places? I'm getting a head nod from both Maria and from Tim.
I think no matter what we're doing, we can always coordinate more closely and work together. This is, those we've been working at this for the past year. And so those that are easier to reach, we've reached, and we've connected them with programs and with payment plans and with things that work for them. So I think let's stay close, and Wendy and I'll make sure and stay coordinated and really, and if you have ever any concerns, let's make sure we're having a conversation and figure out how to be successful here. Because we've not disconnected some of these customers for almost a year and a half by the time we do this. And you should know we make 8 different attempts, both physically with knocks on the door and calling, to be able to connect with people before they are disconnected. So 8 different connection points. And so we really view disconnections as an absolute last resort.
I would concur with that as well. We do, when we had our COVID funds available, we did actively work and coordinate with all the different utilities and made sure all of our mutual customers were taken care of. But now I'm curious, I want to figure out how to do 8 touch points. I think we're up to about 6. So you got us beat a little bit. We don't knock on the door, so that's going to be one of them. So but we're getting closer. We're going to catch you.
Well, I think a good partnership. Thank you.
We're going to help make them whole one way or the other. So I really appreciate the information here today. Wendy continues to keep us very much informed about what's going on with PGE, so we can make sure our constituents know how to be resilient. So I'm going to, unless I have somebody else with a burning question, I'm going to finish with this one. One of the things we found during the power outage that people were incredibly unprepared to deal with power for their medical equipment and power for food storage. So in other areas, Red Cross's list has been really, really comprehensive. But these two things came up over and over again in the messages I was receiving from constituents. And I think that if there are ways that we can partner on some messaging on how people can be prepared for these two specific needs that we are going to face when Cascadia hits, we're going to be even that much more ahead. So I want to flag that one as a follow-up.
That would be excellent. I think we learned a lot about water treatment facilities and sewer facilities that were designed, their backup generation was designed for smaller populations, or was just old in and of itself. So I think we have tremendous learnings in terms of preparedness overall. And please know we are taking all of those to heart and have specific action plans along with them. And let's add this together and maybe we can work on some communications jointly.
That would be great. Anybody else have any questions for Maria, Kevin, Bill, and Wendy? I'm looking for people madly waving their hands. I've got a thank you from Councilor Day, Councilor Herrera, and all of us. This has been very helpful, and we are very thankful for our partnership with PGE. And we look forward to a bright and powerful collaboration.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the things we learned during this last year was the needs that people have for housing and homelessness did not get worse or did not get better, but actually became more pronounced. And while these two topics of resiliency for energy and housing and homelessness that may not seem completely connected, I'm very glad that we actually have these two together, because being able to talk about the needs of people in difficult situations does go hand in glove. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Janet Carlson, our former Marion County Commissioner, Jan Calvin, and Carla Munns. These three amazing individuals have been doing the incredible lift for the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. I get to call myself the president of the board, but I got to tell you, the power is these three incredibly skilled individuals who understand the needs of people who are homeless, who are housing insecure, and how to bring our community together. So what happened last year as COVID hit, and then the fires, and then the ice storm and so forth, we found that the relationships, as Maria alluded to, prepared in advance, paid off, and paid off big in being able to meet people's needs where they were in some of our most vulnerable communities. So it's my pleasure to kick this to Jan and Janet and Carla to talk to us about what we've been accomplishing as the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance and where we are going forward. Janet and Jan and Carla, I'll kick it to you.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to thank you, Mayor Clark, and the City Council for allowing us to have some time on your work session agenda tonight to talk about the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. I'm going to go ahead and bring up this PowerPoint presentation, if I can get it. All right. Let's see. There we go. Everybody can see that and can hear me okay? We good? All right. Also, as Kathy very humbly introduced herself, she has been just the driving force behind this, and she serves as chair of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. And as I go through, I'm also going to explain part of the structure. She's also the president of the ORS 190 entity that supports the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. So we really appreciate her volunteer efforts on our behalf. So this is a progress report. We were before you, I think the last time might have been 2 years ago. Maybe there was a short presentation that went along with budget, but when this was just an idea to have this continuum of care, as we call it. And before we get into what the Alliance is and what we have done since we talked to you the last time, we want to spend a few minutes talking about who is homeless and what's driving homelessness in our 2-county region. So one of the things about talking about who is homeless is that our data quality still needs a lot of improvement. And so that's one of the major things that we're addressing as the Alliance. The numbers that are put on this slide are taken from coordinated entry data. So this is when folks go out in the field and do interviews with folks on a year-round basis. And that information is entered into a common database that's called the Homeless Management Information System. There were more than 1,100 people experiencing homelessness when this snapshot was taken. And we also included some breakdowns in especially a group that's called chronically homeless, because these are people who have been on the streets a very long time. Oftentimes they experience both mental health and addictions issues. And for the Marion-Polk region, we have a much higher percentage of chronically homeless individuals than in Oregon generally or in the nation. So at the time the snapshot was taken, 49% of our statistics were chronically homeless of our population. The national comparison was 17%, 17. So you can see how much higher it is. And in Oregon, it was 37%. Sometimes people will talk about homelessness and think it's a Portland issue, or they think it's a Salem issue. But what this slide shows is that homelessness can be found throughout the Marion and Polk region, even in the rural areas, which is why it's so important that we take a regional approach. So this is school district data. And if you want to delve into it more deeply, Jen can explain it when we get into more discussion. The other point that we wanted to make is that homelessness can happen to anyone. I often hear, and I don't know if you hear this, but people will say, well, homelessness is a choice that people make. A lot of people just want to be homeless. And for most people experiencing homelessness, it's not their choice. I belong to a number of groups on Facebook about homelessness, and this story came up a few months ago, and I thought it was really compelling. So I'm going to share it with you. So this person who wrote this story is a social service worker in our region. You're a single parent with a child. You work full-time for $14. You bring home roughly $800 per paycheck. Your bills are $1,000 rent, $150 electricity, and a $250 car payment. Let's do the math. You bring home about $1,600 a month, and your bills average $1,400. You're making it, but barely. But this doesn't even include groceries, gas, or car insurance. It's a really cold December and you get a power bill for $600. How do you pay that? To put it simply, you can't. So your power gets shut off. Your lease says you will be evicted if your utilities are terminated. Now you're in court and you have 10 days to get out. You're in luck. You found somewhere else to live with 3 days to spare, and it's only $650 a month. But to get in, you have to pass a background and credit check, which you can't do because you just got evicted. Even if you could pass it, you're looking at $1,300 to move in after paying the deposit and first month's rent. Your landlord shows up at 7 a.m. with the police and changes your locks. Now you're living in your car with your 7-year-old son and everything you need to get by in your back seat. You tried to rent a storage unit, but you don't have a billing address. You pay to shower at local truck stops and eat whatever can be cooked in a gas station microwave. Someone sees you and your son living like this and calls Child Protective Services. They remove your child from your care. As if this isn't devastating enough, you lose your job too because an employee losing a child reflects poorly on a company. You apply for a low-income apartment where the waiting list is 3 to 7 years. Then you go into Walmart to put in a job application. When you get back to your car, your back window has been smashed and someone helped themselves to your belongings. Remember that it is winter and really cold, and now you have damage to your only shelter. You call your insurance agent who says your deductible is $1,000 and they're going to increase your monthly rate since now you're high risk. You call the homeless shelter as a last resort and all their beds are full. I think you get the point. The people we work with every day are these people. We are all so close to homelessness and don't even realize it. All it takes is one unexpected bill, one fender bender, one layoff, one house fire. So now, what does research say are the top causes of homelessness? And you can see the list on your screen. I think domestic violence is the leading cause for women. And we have really strong relationships with Center for Hope and Safety and Sable House within the Alliance. Also, lack of affordable housing. I think everybody recognizes that this is a major issue that we have in our 2-county region. So what I hope you take away from this discussion is that there are a lot of different reasons that people become homeless, which makes the issue that much more difficult to solve. And our approaches will differ depending on if you're working with a youth or with a veteran, with women and children, or with someone with a mental health condition. So any comments or questions about what's driving homelessness before we move into the next section?
Janet, I just wanted to point out that, in the meetings that I've gone to regarding this, particularly the youth one, it's been fascinating to me to realize how complicated this issue and how well the Homeless Alliance is doing at asking people what they need. This is not an academic study. This is a very boots on the ground kind of operation, asking the youth and the families and the individuals what they need and proceeding from there. So that to me has been a really impressive part of this organization.
Thank you for that, Laura. And I didn't mention that you have been our stalwart official alternate for Kathy and coming to a lot of meetings. So really appreciate your participation as well. So we're going to move through now our mission, our structure.
Councilor Day, did you have your hand up for this, or was that from before?
I'm sorry, it was from before, but I do actually have a question, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask it or not.
Well, give it a go.
I'll lower my hand. My question is real simple. Maybe it's not simple. I'm just curious if other jurisdictions have reached out to the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance to I guess, copy your model, for lack of a better phrase.
So, Ross, if you would let me just kind of go through the structure first,
sure.
and then I'd be happy to actually, because I think it will make more sense once we kind of show how we're organized. But thank you for that question. Any other questions?
And I'm going to give a short answer. Yes, people have reached out to find out what we're doing because of the strength of the relationships and collaboration that have been happening in our region.
All right. Ready to move forward? Okay, so we're going to talk about our mission, then our structure, our goals, and our plan. So this is our mission statement, which you see on your screen now. And we adopted this as part of our strategic plan in June of 2020. I think what you can glean from this is that we're focused on what they call evidence-based approaches to get proven results. So we're not looking to do just kind of whatever feels good or whatever, what somebody comes up with on the spur of the moment. But we're really looking at what does research say? What do the practitioners say that we need to do in order to address homelessness? And sometimes that takes maybe longer than people are patient for, but I think we're going to reap a lot better results in the end by taking that approach. We want to thank the City of Salem. They have offered us their public information officer some of her time to work with us on our communications. And so we have this lovely logo, thanks to Emily Enders and also Liz Schrader from United Way, who helped us develop that. You can see it represents movement and it represents alignment, which fits perfectly with the work that we're doing as an alliance. So the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance is the continuum of care for the Marion and Polk County region. So what is a continuum of care? The Continuum of Care program is a federal program. It's administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, as we call them lovingly. You can see on the screen two overarching purposes of the program. The first one is community-wide planning and coordination. And this is planning around all of the dollars and programs that address homelessness. So we're looking to try to coordinate everything, even those things that we don't get money for. But then the second overarching purpose is to submit a single community application for a specific set of dollars. And it's the Continuum of Care program dollars, and that's through the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Now, this is not a huge amount of money in the scope of kind of budgets, because we do a big money map and there are millions of dollars being spent in the 2-county region right now. And our budget that we have is a little less than $1 million coming from this particular program. But we do think that we can build this funding stream over time if we can achieve good results. So a brief history of the continuum of care. The federal program's been around since 1994. In Marion and Polk counties between 1994 and 2011, Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency coordinated the program for no money. They just administered it as part of the time that their staff had. And then in 2011, HUD came up with a lot of more intense types of responsibilities. Particularly, they wanted data entered into this homeless management information system, and they announced that they were going to determine the funding allocation based on performance of the programs being funded rather than on the need of the area. So the whole program kind of switched in 2011. And Community Action said that they just didn't have the capacity to be able to staff that kind of effort under those new regulations. So there was a meeting, and the folks that were involved, which were primarily nonprofit organizations involved with delivering services to people who were homeless, decided that they would join 26 other counties in the Balance of State Continuum of Care, which is called the ROC, the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care. There was a pretty major lack of governmental participation at that time, which I think is actually the strength of how we've re-envisioned this continuum of care. But as we approached, well, actually, to back up, in 2016 and 2017, 4 of us, myself, Kathy Clark, Anna Peterson from the city of Salem, and Jennifer Wheeler from Polk County, co-chaired the Mid-Willamette Homeless Initiative Task Force. And we held our meetings right in your city council chambers for about a year and developed a strategic plan with a lot of recommendations. One of the recommendations was to take another look at whether being in this 28 county continuum of care was benefiting our region. And so in 2019, there was a study that was done, and then we went around to each of the jurisdictions to get resolutions passed and to share with them the information that we had in the study. And overwhelmingly, the feedback was that we needed to pull out Marion and Polk counties of that 28 county continuum of care and form our own. So that was approved by HUD. We put in the application in December 2019, and it was approved. And so now we are, again, the continuum of care, but we've just been around now for a little over a year. So we've been spending a lot of time standing up the organization. You can see on this slide what a continuum of care does. So it's a lot of work to improve the system of services to address homelessness. So we convene organizations to share information and best practices. We collect and analyze data. We evaluate the quality of services that are being delivered in the community. We identify and align resources, and we make sure the region's prepared to submit an annual application for funding. We haven't done this yet. We thought we were going to do that last summer, and then the COVID hit, and HUD decided that they were going to give everyone a waiver. So they just carried over all the contracts for another year. Just to give you a sense of the scope of that application, Carla, Jan, and I met to go through it line by line, the one that had been the year before, and it ended up being a 5-hour meeting just to go through every element of that. So it's very, very detailed and comprehensive, and we're looking forward to doing our first one probably in the next few months. So this is on your screen, and also I provided this information as a separate document that's in your agenda packet. So if you want to be able to keep it and read it more closely, you've got that. So we have the Alliance board, and we have 20 voting members on that board. That board has an executive committee, and you can see the members of the executive committee on the right. We also, because the Alliance board is not a legal entity, it's a collaborative, we were working with the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, who kind of helped birth us, to help us with our administration. And with working very closely with them, it became obvious that we needed to form an independent legal entity to be the collaborative applicant for our continuum of care. So we formed an ORS 190 entity, and I'll just say this very lovingly because I know there are some folks in the room who are attorneys, but we had this big meeting with the attorneys. So, you know, there's like 8 organizations, and so there's 8 attorneys plus COGS attorney plus, I mean, there were probably, I don't know, 14 attorneys in the room. And so I said, what are we going to call this ORS 190 entity? And they said, you're going to call it the ORS 190 entity. So that is what it is called. Kathy's asked for us to have a little jazzier name, but right now that is the legal name that was submitted to the Secretary of State. So kind of that's what we're stuck with. You can see Jan and Carla and myself serve as we're contracted staff to the ORS 190 entity and to the Alliance Board. But that big square in the middle is really where all the action takes place. That is the Continuum of Care Collaborative Committee. It's a come one, come all committee. You can see we have excellent co-chairs. We have Kim Parker Jairnes, who was with the Workforce Council, and then Ian Dixon McDonald with Marion Pope Food Share, and they're actively participating in our meetings. We have 100 individuals that are on the email list with over 50 organizations. Jan and Carla staff that, and I think they said at the last meeting they had, there was something like 47 people. So it's not a small group of folks that get together. And this is where they start talking about these different issues. Like one of the early things they did was get a universal release of information form. So they're aligning practices with all of these many, many different providers that deal with different aspects of homelessness. We have 4 committees. You can see those on the right and the left towards the bottom of the large square. HMIS Users Work Group, that's about the database. Coordinated Entry Committee, that's about doing those and intensive interviews out in the field and getting that information. And then we have the Performance and Evaluation Committee and the, and I can't see it. Is it the Youth? What is the 4th one?
Point in Time Count Work Group.
Point in Time Count Work Group. Thank you. I'm sorry that the Zoom is over the top of the right side of my screen. And then we have through the Collaborative Committee, 4 subcommittees that you can see across the bottom: Veterans, Lived Experience, Warming Shelters, and Youth and Young Adults. And then these are the logos of our many board members. And I did include a board roster in your packet so that you can see the names of the folks. We are a membership organization. So that means that the organization is the member, and then they get to designate who serves on the board of directors.
And I just want to flag on the youth that came from the Youth Challenge. And because it was so successful working collaboratively, that has become part of the Homeless Alliance.
So let me now get to Councillor Day's question about, so do others look to us? And I think Kathy answered it. Yes, we have had a number of inquiries. Every organization in the nation has a continuum of care. So that means that in Oregon, we have that balance of state, but then there are continuums of care for Lane County. There's Central Oregon has one, and so on. And I don't know that we've received a lot of inquiries from other continuums of care about what we're doing, but in terms of, if you talk about jurisdictions, we've had inquiries like worked with Silverton a little bit. I've talked to folks in Woodburn. Jan and Chris Hoy just went out a month or so ago to Dallas in Polk County and had a discussion with them. So there is some interest for others. And as I mentioned at the board, when this question came up, I think it was actually to our benefit that the numbers of jurisdictions that we started with were a bit limited to the ones that we have, because there's this very high level of expectation. And if you can't deliver immediately, then folks are kind of, well, why are we in this if we're not really getting anything out of it? And so I think getting our feet on the ground and getting the organization stood up with the groups that have been working with us for some time has been a benefit to us. And then as we move forward and get that first NOFA under our belt and start building our resources, I think that we'll be able to reach out and have more jurisdictions that are involved. So I'm hoping that answered your question. You did. Okay, great. I see the thumbs up. All right. So any other questions about how we're organized before we move into the strategic plan with our goals and strategies? We good? All right, so our strategic plan, as I mentioned earlier, was approved in June of 2020. We're actually in the middle of the process right now of revising our strategic plan. Jan Calvin is our resident expert on the strategic plan and has put a lot of work into it. The strategic plan has 9 goals, and we had a discussion about the kind of just an update of the strategic plan. I think it took Jan almost an hour to go through it, so I'm not going to go through that in that level of detail. You can see that the goals range from the homeless services system, which I mentioned we've spent probably our greatest amount of effort on this year, standing up the organization, to all types of housing, permanent housing, transitional housing, shelters, the idea of affordable housing. We have a goal around specific populations like veterans and youth and victims of domestic violence. We're looking at aligning systems for prevention. Health and safety is becoming, I think, more and more of an issue, and we're actually engaging our health providers probably more so in the last couple months than we had earlier. And then the idea of having community engagement and really involving people in the community around the issue of homelessness. And so if you were to look at all of the smaller objectives and tasks that go along with these 9 goals, there's a 66-page document that was sent to the board last month that outlines it line by line by line. So again, I'm not going to spend an hour doing that, but there's a lot of depth to these that this one slide really doesn't necessarily show you. Also in the strategic plan are 7 strategies, and I am going to go through those one by one because I think we can do that fairly quickly. The first one is to engage a full array of stakeholders. So I already mentioned the work of the collaborative committee, that big box in the center of the org chart where engagement occurs on a monthly basis. We also convened our first annual summit in February, and we had 109 people on Zoom. We had to actually expand our Zoom account for that one meeting from 63 organizations. And then more recently, we had 10 providers that came together to submit a collaborative grant to Oregon Housing and Community Services. And I'll more on that in a minute. The second strategy is to prioritize chronically homeless individuals and youth, while also supporting other important populations. Because our region has such significant numbers of chronically homeless people, and these are the people that are the most difficult to house. And if Jimmy Jones, I'm sure you've talked to him from Community Action, but he will tell you that our approach in this region was kind of the opposite. We were creaming, if you will, taking the easiest to house and using our resources and just sort of ignoring the folks that were chronically homeless, which is part of the explanation about why you're seeing so many people on the streets today that have been there for such a long time. So we want to flip that around and really work on moving those numbers down of chronically homeless. We mentioned youth earlier, and there are very few services in our region for homeless youth. And so that's an area, and Carla Munn staffs that work group and committee. And we recognize that there are other populations with important needs, and we're going to continue to include those populations in our planning and service delivery. Racial and ethnic equity. This is an issue that has really rocked our nation this last year, and HUD also requires continuums of care to analyze data related to equity and service delivery. We just wrapped up a project conducted by the PACE program at Willamette University's Atkinson School of Management. So the study included interviews with key community leaders, a survey of service providers, and data analysis. And we received the final report, and the board is now talking about some of the recommendations, but they spent a whole year doing it, and it really is an excellent piece of work. Strategy 4 is to expand community awareness. We know that there's a heightened interest in homelessness based on community surveys, and I'm sure you're noticing and hearing it. People are asking you about it from your constituencies. We also know there's a lot of misinformation about who is homeless, why people are homeless, what people need. And so one of the examples is the amount of trash that has been found in some of the homeless camps that's actually the result of people who mean well, who bring things to folks who are homeless and leave them, and then they're not things that they can really use. And so here's an example of people trying to do a good thing, but it actually then compounds the problem. As I mentioned earlier, we've been blessed to have Emily Enders from City of Salem to help us with some communication tools, including this slideshow. And we're also talking to Capital Community Media about developing some vignettes that inform the public about homelessness. And I do have to say, I don't know if you've seen the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce has just done a small video that Jan sent to me, and I posted it on Facebook, but it's really excellent as well. So I think there are a lot of different organizations are starting to put their resources towards getting the word out about what drives this particular issue. Strategy number 5 is to use proven approaches and voices of lived experience and data in order to make good decisions. So to end and prevent homelessness, we need to use approaches that have been proven to get results. One really good example of this is the Built for Zero initiative. This is a national initiative. The Alliance joined it several months before we were even officially a continuum of care. Kaiser Permanente paid the $10,000 joining fee for us, and it gives us a coach for technical assistance and a data template to build out the system. So the premise of Built for Zero is that providers work together to develop a list of people who are on the street by name at highest risk or highest needs for housing. And then case managers, folks that are involved in the system, meet several times a month to do what they call case conferencing, and they strategize together about how to permanently house people on the list. Jan, again, is the person that's coordinating this and provides the quarterly reports for the board. And I think we are now pretty much completed. I think we're minus one task or something I saw in the last, have we done that one?
As soon as the board adopts that policy next month, we're done.
All right, so we are, yes. And through Built for Zero, our first chronically homeless person was housed, and I think in Redwood Crossings, that was last fall. And so we're starting to work through that list. There are other communities around the nation that have brought homelessness to what they call functional zero in their communities by using this method. By functional zero, that means that you recognize that you're not going to stop people from becoming homeless, but you have fewer people actually becoming homeless, and you've housed the people that are on your list that have been homeless for a long time. So the last two strategies, 6 and 7, are around expanding shelter and housing capacity and leveraging resources to support the coordinated homeless system. And we know that, again, to end homelessness, we need housing units for people, and there's a severe shortage of affordable housing in our region. So while people are waiting for housing, shelter is critical. Union Gospel Mission, other shelters, and transitional housing providers are actively working with the Alliance. And we're also encouraged by the work of the 3 housing authorities and working with landlords to locate new units for people in need, and also in constructing projects like Redwood Crossings. And now we've been hearing about Sequoia Crossings and Yaquina Hall, and a lot of work that's been going on through the Salem Housing Authority. And this, I think, is really where governments come in and play such an important role, because the nonprofits can provide services, and oftentimes those services are critical, but our goal is not to just make people more comfortable while they continue in a state of housing. Our goal is to permanently house people. And who actually figures out the zoning, the infrastructure, transportation, sewer, water? It's the cities and the counties that do that. And without them at the table, I think we were missing just a huge part of the equation in order to be able to, address this major problem that we have in our community. So by implementing our strategic plan step by step, we believe ending homelessness is possible. One of the other documents that I included in your agenda packet is a list of accomplishments that I compiled for the budget message. We just had our budget committee meeting a couple months ago. And so it's a much longer list than what you see on the slides. I'm just going to give you a few highlights off of that long list, but I would suggest that you take a look at that if you'd like to see all of the accomplishments that we've done in the last year. In 2019, I mentioned the $10,000 Kaiser Permanente contribution. We had a development council and that submitted the application to HUD. 5 days later, we had HUD approval for that application. Then in 2020, in January, this was a month before we actually formed and had our first official board meeting. The CBEL group, Community Business and Education Leaders, this was Jim Seymour, came to our development council meeting and announced a $150,000 award from Mountain West Investment Corporation over 3 years to get us started. We had our first board of directors meeting on February 13th, 2020. I always remember that because it's the 13th, the lucky day, right? We ratified our charter, elected leaders, appointed committee members, approved an interim intergovernmental agreement until we were able to get that ORS 190 entity together several months later. In June, we approved our strategic plan. And in July, the board approved the local application materials for the annual NOFA, and we developed a regional gaps analysis. And these documents are on our website. In August, the ORS 190 entity was formed. The collaborative committee endorsed a universal release of information form. In September, we found out that we were able to enlist the help of a team of MBA students to do the equity study that I talked about. In November, the Challenge to End Youth Homelessness made the decision to join the Alliance as an official subcommittee. In December, the Performance and Evaluation Committee developed a process to monitor the region's funded projects and system-wide performance. And then in December, we approved some HMIS agreements. In January, and I think this is huge because one of the things that we get points for on this NOFA, which then determines how much money we get as a region, is how many organizations are putting data into the homeless management information system. And the other piece of that is that the fewer organizations that put data in, the more the data is just about that smaller group. So for example, if Union Gospel Mission doesn't get federal money and they don't put data into the homeless management information system, then nobody that they serve are part of those collective numbers when we talk about how many people are homeless. So it increased, and this is a credit to Jan because she also does this particular area, from 25% in February 2020 when we started out, more recently to 75%. So that's a huge increase in participation. In late January was the annual point in time count, which is HUD requires that, and that's where they roll up all the numbers and say how many folks are homeless. It's not quite as accurate as the community, as the coordinated entry approach, but it is something that we work on, and Carla is the one that's responsible for that, and that happened over a 2-week period. In February, we had that big summit that I mentioned, and then in March, we capped off our spring with the announcement that we got a $5.5 million grant. The ESG stands for Emergency Solutions Grant. The CV stands for COVID. Jan worked with those 10 providers and submitted what they called a collaborative grant. And so we got our full amount, which not everyone did. Plus, there was one more provider, Easter Seals, Oregon, that applied from Marion and Polk counties, and they also received the amount that they were asking for. So now we've been rolling in contracts and all kinds of stuff, trying to get that thing off the ground. But we're very excited about it, and it shows this is another example where collaboration really counts because we were able to pull all of those folks together instead of having them competing against each other, and we were able to bring in that full amount into our region. The collaborative committee in January also had a discussion about what's better or what's different after the alliance. And they pointed to several things. Under the questions about system development, they noted that networking opportunities through committees and virtual meetings, reducing travel, were important. Under practice, they talked about improvements through using coordinated entry and also alignment to address the wildfire evacuee needs. Under client benefits, they noted that improved relationships among the agencies prevented returns to homelessness or people moving into homelessness. And under capacity building, they said they've seen more collaboration among agencies and more sharing of resources. So again, I want to express appreciation to the City of Kaiser for being part of the Alliance. I know your constituents often ask how they can help, and there's a few ideas across the bottom of this slide. They can contribute money, they can volunteer. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities and a lot of need. Committees, we have many committees that people can join in work groups on almost any topic that you can imagine. And then helping us inform others and get the word out in a way that the information is accurate and people understand better what is driving homelessness and what we can do to help. And then finally, our contact information is on the last slide. You can see our website at the bottom. Again, we want to thank Chair Clark and also Chris Hoy from City of Salem that serves as the vice chair of the Alliance Board and the vice president of the ORS 190 Entity Board. And then our team, Jan, Carla, and myself. And that is our story, and we're sticking to it. So I'd like to welcome any more questions or comments.
Thank you, Janet. Jan, can you talk a little bit about some of the work you've been doing and kind of elaborate on the, oh heavens, I just had a senior moment. You're a collaborative committee, are you not? Or is that Carla?
Both Carla and I staff the collaborative committee that is chaired by Kim and Ian.
So the main thing is that is the foundation. That was all that work that went into helping us align a vision, data, understanding what everybody's doing. And then the collaborative committee has built a fabric. It's better, it's stronger than a network. It's a fabric that when COVID hit last year, that fabric got tested and it held. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the relationships and the collaboration between our local agencies and governments evolve and strengthen?
Yeah, one of the first things that comes to mind, Mayor Clark, is that, you know, that when we look at how do systems work and serve people, there is sometimes that dynamic of the you come to me versus I'll go to you. And so many of these folks are already out in community, right? They're not sitting behind a desk waiting for people to come to them to get their help. And so when COVID happened, one of the things that we saw is we increased the collaboration between all the folks that are in the field, okay? Whether on the streets or in designated or undesignated camps, but doing their outreach work. They started using what's called Basecamp, which is a virtual real-time communication tool. So they get pop-ups on their phone, they're chatting with each other. We've got folks from government agencies sending information so it can be distributed out in the field. And right now, the idea of where can people get vaccinations, that's being taken to the field, and people are being encouraged and educated about those opportunities and the benefits of those opportunities for themselves. So that's a quick note. There also became a much stronger, instead of this agency and that agency going here or there and not talking to each other, they started creating a common schedule. And they said, hey, we're going out here. Who all wants to join us? So we've got people who are coming from 5 different agencies who are working together with their materials that are going to be most beneficial to folks and helping connect them and do that human walk alongside, the relationship building amongst folks, which is so important to engaging people with where they are at and then helping them move to a place that is greater stability. So I can't speak highly enough of the outreach staff. And when I do talk to folks from other COCs, I collaborate on some statewide things. They say, you have more than 1 outreach worker, more than 2, more than 5? And we're getting 11 additional outreach workers in this region. So I think our ability, 1, to identify who and what their needs are, and then 2, to help them is just going to expand exponentially over these next few months.
Thank you, Jan. Carla, you were involved in the point in time count. And while the data between that and our coordinated entry are a little bit different, the conversations that happened around the pit count and so forth and doing it differently this year I think was very informative to us. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience was?
Yes, sorry, I got some family home. The experience that we had this year was really exciting. It was the first year of the COC kind of getting up and running and getting behind the pit count more formally. Before that, it was run by Community Action Agency. So we learned a lot. We just conducted our first survey post pit count to get some feedback from those that participated. So that was really great. And this was the first year that the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde had their own team go out and try to find some of their homeless populations. So it was very exciting to have more partners at the table, more engagement, the more folks that found out about this work group and the planning efforts, the more broadly this work group was attended. So in terms of the data input and the relation to coordinated entry and pit count, it's not perfect by any means. I think this year, some of the shelter counts were a bit off. Some of the Polk County counts were a bit off, but each year it's something different. It's something else. We just do the best that we can. COVID protocols were really challenging to overcome. A lot of volunteers that historically were ready to volunteer are those that fell into the high risk category. So the quantity of volunteers was less. Community Action did deploy, I believe, every staff that they had for the pit count to go out and help count. So they really stepped up to the plate. The community was really really engaged with moving forward with the pit count this year, even though we had the option to submit a waiver to HUD and opt out. But our community was really passionate about, we need these data, we need the contact with our individuals, we need to be able to link them to resources through that relationship building component. Was a great way to get out tents and socks and food to those that are experiencing homelessness. So it's not perfect. Again, what Jan said, the coordinated entry data is likely better data. And it's only going to get even
Jan
more.
could actually explain that. So
Yes, thank you, Councillor Day, for the specific question about why they're different, the point in time count versus a coordinated entry database. And coordinated entry, you can take your snapshot over a period of time. So when folks get assessed, they go through the data collection process for those intensive interviews. It doesn't happen on just one day. Point in time count is just one day. So we can say for a period of 3 months, 6 months, this year, how many people did we assess who are new? We can also say how many people are currently actively homeless. Okay? So that database is so much stronger and more robust. We literally have hundreds of data points that we can slice and dice differently. And because of that, it can become confusing. One example of even what we may have added to the confusion through the way we present our data tonight, because when we said 1,188 people were in that snapshot for coordinated entry data, and then the next slide we talk about 1,900 students who are homeless. Well, wait a minute, 1,188 people and 1,900 students, that doesn't add up. That's because Department of Education has a different definition of homelessness than HUD does. So when Department of Ed counts them, they also consider people who are sheltered in motels for a long period of time, might be doubled up with family members. They are still considered homeless as far as the education world is considered and the benefits that they can reap because of that status. So when we talk about what is the data and who can we help, who is our community trying to wrap their arms around and support to be more stable, we're looking at developing a data dashboard that will give us apples to apples and try to be more consistent over time and share that information more broadly throughout the community.
I think one last comment about that too, that just echoes what Jan said, is this year, the first day of the point in time count, there was a complete crazy snowstorm that happened. So that will undoubtedly change the data that we're able to get in that point in time snapshot, whereas coordinated entry is that running roster of information. And so that's just kind of gives you the difference. And so every year on the last week of January across the entire nation, all the COCs are responsible for conducting a pit count. So we're all getting the best shot that we can, but it is also very much related to what circumstances are at play with that week in January.
So you might ask, why bother? And one of the realities is that not everybody has a robust coordinated entry system across the nation. And HUD actually does still look at a basic needs calculation, and they use pit count in addition to the performance calculations. So it's still to our benefit to conduct the pit count.
And if I might, doesn't the the data's got to have some value. The pit counts have to have some value to you, right?
Well, that's where I say that they have a value in giving some number to HUD that they consider more validated than and consistent across COC to COC, because not every COC has that other data coordinated entry capacity that we do. So as it pertains to potentially bringing in additional funds, that's one of the benefits. The other benefit is less about the numbers and more about the relationship, I believe. And I think Carla started to intimate around that when people in the community can talk face to face with folks who are unhoused, they can get a little better feel for what's really going on. And so that opportunity for volunteers to connect and hear face to face, I think, has its benefits as well.
Are there other questions that any of you might have? And I would point you to our website, the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. We do have a website that goes all the way back to work at the initiative. And then going forward, there is a newsletter you can share from there. And I try to share it out when it gets posted, and I can copy the link. And also, we try to bring together the needs lists from different organizations who are involved in different outreach ministries, again, and efforts. We're not competing, we're working together. So we try to ask the agencies what they need for their particular programs and share that out as well. One of the things that I've been very gratified to note through the work of the initiative and now the Alliance is the growing capacity we have for shelter, for supportive housing, and recognizing the specific needs that we have within the community. And of course, our council has been grappling with, along with our planning commission and planning department and our city, with the fact that we have no land available for affordable housing. And even looking at our housing distribution, that a lot of that in our shared UGB is determined to be in Salem. But that doesn't mean we go, hey, this is Salem's problem, go on. No, that's not how Kaiser rolls. And that's why we have been so involved as a community, as in a council, in the Homeless Alliance, recognizing that the humanity, the human value of every individual is why we continue to invest in evidence-based, results-oriented work to support these individuals where they're at and help them move toward a better life. We hear about Sequoia Crossing is coming out, is going to be going to construction, permanent supportive housing. The veterans facility that's being built across the street from the new YMCA in Salem for permanent housing for veterans. Tanner project, which is now open for male and female veterans. And I can go on and on about the places, but it's not just the places. They have the services. And why do they have the services? Because the service providers, the faith community, and the housing providers are all working together now to make places where people can be with the supports that they need to be successful. And I think that is where we are succeeding as a region, and we will continue to add capacity that makes a difference for the people we really want to serve in a way that is meaningful. So I am very, very thankful to be part of a community that recognizes making a real difference is worth doing, not just go, hey, I'll throw a couple bucks at it and walk away. That's not how Kaiser rolls. thank you, Carla, for this. Ben Crosby from the City of Kaiser participated in the pit count work group and was a wonderful asset to the group. Ben Crosby is amazing, and thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions to wrap up today's work session? Councilor Day.
I just have a comment, and I just want to say thanks to everyone. Jan, Commissioner Carlson, Carla, obviously Mayor Clark. This is an important issue to me. I know it is to everybody. And the work you do is just unbelievable. And I hope you guys understand that. I hope you understand you're making a real difference in people's lives. And, you know, I'm glad to be just a really small part of it. And I hope to get more involved as I get into this job. But you guys are you're just unbelievable. And thank you for everything you guys have done.
Thank you, Counselor. We have one more question. I've listened to the term affordable housing. What can we really do about that? Is affordable housing to the Alliance subsidized housing? And this might be more of a Shane question.
Well, I could just say really quickly that affordable housing means a lot of different things to different people. When I was running for office, affordable housing meant to the builders that they didn't have to put sidewalks in, you know, and follow certain codes because it was cheaper to build homes that way. So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. The way that housing vouchers work, and so to answer Councilor Kohler, there are some subsidized housing projects primarily in Salem. There are some in Marion County too. Marion County Housing Authority runs some senior housing. The Mount Angel, where the Glockenspiel is housing that Marion County has put together. But by and large, the most opportunities to get people housed are in the private sector with apartments. And there are a lot of housing vouchers, and we're having a meeting coming up in another, I can't remember, week or so that Jan's putting together with emergency housing vouchers. So through the dollars that have come through, there are more vouchers that are coming out. The problem with vouchers is that they have what they call a payment standard. And so the amount of rent has to be within a particular range, depending on the family size and how many bedrooms. And that's probably as detailed as I can get. And Jan could probably give you a whole lot more detail on it, but I'm not sure how beneficial that would be. And so there just aren't that many. Multifamily housing, there's just very limited amounts of new building. I think that the housing, the apartments, so let me just anecdotally, when we were moving and we ended up renting a house in Kaiser right before that last year when we were in Salem, we looked at apartments and I was stunned then, this was 2018, that most of them were more than $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month. It was cheaper for us to rent a home than it was to rent an apartment. And so with that level of rent, there's no way someone can actually use a voucher there. I had a person that I worked with, we made a film about her for the reentry initiative. She was paying like $550 a month in an apartment by the 25th Street post office when she couldn't get a voucher. When she got a voucher, she's now paying like $200, I think it's $250 or something like that, maybe $300 now. And so her disposable income went way up. All of a sudden, she didn't have to have, you know, she was living on $65 a month disposable income for everything before she was able to get that housing. So it's critical to people. But unless we get more spaces, and I think, you know, supply and demand, if there's greater supply, it's going to bring down a lot of those rents, possibly from where they are right now. And also then these specific projects that Salem's building, the Redwood Crossings, that's permanent supportive housing, and some of the other projects are expanding the supply there where we know that it's affordable. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's probably a big part of it, is just trying to get more multifamily housing. Jan, do you want to add anything to what I read?
Well, I will call to the chat feature where I put a resource in there that was recommended to me highly, and it was very informative about how affordable housing can and cannot pencil out, the challenges of doing affordable housing. But I think when we talk about affordable housing from a HUD standpoint, that's one thing. The other is just housing stock. We do not have the housing stock at all levels. And there are historic reasons for that, from the housing bubble and the time 30 years ago when we had 10% vacancy rates, and now we have 1% vacancy rates.
Right.
And I'll also point out that one of the other gaps in our housing stock is transitional housing. When people are leaving residential programs such as Simonka Place or the Center for Hope and Safety, that next step before they can live on their own, that's transitional, also having to be very low cost as these people are moving through their continuum of personal growth. That's another gap that in conversation with Jane Downing and Dan Clem have been identified as well. And that's another whole layer that we need to address in our housing supply in our Salem-Keizer area specifically, and Marion Polk County in general. All right, other questions? All right, thank you so much to Jan and Janet and Carla for joining us this evening, and fabulous information. We're going to keep on pushing forward with the Alliance, and thank you, City Council and staff, for supporting Keizer being a strong voice and work along with all of our regional partners in supporting the Alliance work on the behalf of some of our most vulnerable neighbors in our community. Is there anything else that we need to address for the good of the order? All right, seeing none, then the time is 7:41 and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you, Janet.
Good to see
Thank you.